This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, before we get started, check out nectargrowth.com. nectargrowth.com. It's free to join, but not for long. Nectar is an extension of the roller coaster. It's where you can start your own journey of self-exploration and growth. In Nectar, you'll find different topics of interest, daily blogs, affirmations, journal prompts, and you can connect with some of the fantastic coaches that have been on the roller coaster. Soon, we'll be adding videos, meditations, live discussions, and events. Our signature course is a journey of self-improvement, and it's valued at $397. But once you join, it's available to you at no cost. So if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you need to change and not sure where to start with Nectar Growth Network. Come join us. You know you're worth it. Now, let's get on with today's show. Do you ever say yes when you really want to say no? I do this all the time. Or even worse, I volunteer to do things even though nobody asked, just because I think it's what's expected. And what happens? Well, I get frustrated, resentful, sometimes a little bit pissed off. Joining me today is John Chilkotowsky of Northstar Coaching to help us understand how we can say no. Hey, John.
Hey, Lucy, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing great also.
Okay. Did I get the name right? Was I close?
You got it. You got it. You're great.
We practiced a few times before we hit record because I didn't want to stumble on that one. So, John, I'm guessing that my story isn't anything new to you. You must hear this all the time.
I do hear it all the time. I will also put my name in the hat and say I am someone for whom this has been challenging also to work with. So I'm not immune to it. And I think it's something that if somebody said they really don't suffer from it, I'd probably ask them a few questions and find out that they've worked on it, right?
But why? Like, why do I feel compelled to say yes? Whether it's to, and I want to say it's almost harder sometimes when it's a friend, because you don't want to feel that you're letting your friend down. But why is it that we just can't say, no, I can't take anything else on, or I can't do it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna, I'm not a clinically trained psychologist. So what I understand, or like the leading theory around this, Lucy, is that somewhere, somehow in our childhood, there was a place where we learned that getting love and approval just by being ourselves wasn't going to happen, or we thought somehow it wasn't going to happen. So we thought we had to conform or perform in some way to earn affection. Like, we all have that desire to be liked, and we don't want to be rejected. So we learned, okay, if I say yes more often, I'm going to accomplish this. I'm going to be liked. I'm going to have affection, friends, family who, so it's probably not true, right? It's probably not true, but that's where they say it comes from. But it's so deeply embedded, it's tough to root out as we go along.
So, I know the impact that it has on me when I take on things that I don't have time to do. Like I said before, I'll get frustrated, or I won't do whatever I've been asked to do well, or I'm not doing something else well. But what is what's more of this sort of emotional and physical stress that we're taking on when we're doing these things?
Hmm. Yeah. So let's see, a couple different ways to go with that. So I mean, the real cost of it, and a lot of times I talk about it in a work context, but for sure it can be in a context outside work as well. But some way, somehow, we are likely going to form bad relationships, right? There's going to be anxiety, right? What's that person going to think of me if I don't do this? There's going to be stress because, as you said, right, I'm already full to the brim, but I'm going to say yes to this no matter what because I fear that this relationship might be, if I say no to helping somebody out on a weekend when I've already got something planned, that might stress this relationship, and this relationship is also important to me. And then also in a work context is burnout, right? You just can't do anything more, and yet you keep saying yes. And then the other place I'd go with this, and I think you started to address it, Lucy, was around when we're saying yes to this thing, we're definitely saying no to other things. And just as a big topic, we're saying no to ourselves. Now, I want to be clear up front here. This isn't saying never say yes. Saying yes is bad. It's not saying that. It's not the specific situation even per se, because I could make up a lot of places where I could say, oh, in this case, saying yes would be just fine there. It's all of our ability to take a step back and assess what's best for us, what's best for the other people in the room or who are playing. If we're at work, it's a team or an organization. And it's just being able to find the balance in there of what's really serving us, them, etc. And so I'll pause there and just come back and say, how was that, Lucy, with your question?
No. It's, yeah, I see where you're going with it. But I guess what it comes down to is in that moment that, say you ask me to do something and I have that initial gut feeling of, oh, good God, no, I just can't do this. How do I create that shift so that I stick with, I can't do this, instead of, going to my default of, sure, okay, let me see what I can do.
Yeah, great question. So there's definitely there's tips and questions and things that I've sort of accumulated along the way here. So maybe I'll try a couple of these and see how these land with you. So one is generally trying to start this practice of saying no if you're not, if you're feeling like I'm not too good at this right now. Being able to start with something small. So like you said, even volunteering your time when it wasn't even asked. But I mean, so something small where it's, someone has asked you, hey, would you come over for 30 minutes and help with this thing, whatever this thing is. Probably they could get somebody else. Probably it's not urgent. Probably all those different things. So one question that I ask, that I attempt to remember to ask myself, because I'm not always doing this perfectly either, is I'll say either am I or how am I looking for approval from this person? So if I say am I, it's a yes, no. If I say how am I, it's acknowledging that probably even in some small, tiny way, I am considering approval as something important in this exchange. So, and a follow-up or two follow-ups, and then you can tell me how any of these land with you, Lucy, if these are going to be helpful or not. How am I adding value to my life by saying yes here? Okay, that's another. And then the third is, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And in here, I'm going to think about, if it's work, I'm thinking about clients. If it's personal, I'm thinking about family, friends, my health, my joy. So I would say, if nothing else, one of the key things that people tend to find useful is to slow down their answer. That's one of the things. So being able to say, if I said, hey, Lucy, would you come over and wash my car tomorrow? And you're like, oh, maybe I should say yes. we're not in the same area, so that's not going to happen.
I'd be like, no.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. That one, see, we got to know there. But just to be able to say, let me check my schedule. Let me check my calendar. Let me check something and get back to you. Just even that pause from a yes can sometimes be helpful. Now, I'm not suggesting lying. I'm not suggesting like, oh, I'm rearranging my sock drawer, right? Like nothing like that. But something that's just acknowledging like, I really want to say yes, and I better pause right now and take stock of what else I have going on in my life. So I'll pause there for that one, just on that note, Lucy.
I've actually sat in meetings where I've literally bit my tongue just so I wouldn't talk, which is extremely hard for me because I'm always talking. But just to stop that urge, when you're, especially now, you're sitting on a Zoom call, you got all these faces looking at everybody, and they're saying, oh, well, who can take care of this? It's just like, I just sit there and I bite my tongue. I'm like, don't talk, don't talk, don't talk.
Yeah. So there's likely, what I would say in here is there's some, it's we're trying to get in that pause. We're trying to get in touch with what's the thought that's coming through. So if you can connect with somehow there's a thought or an emotion, it's probably not going to go away, but it's recognizing it in the moment and being able to say, oh, there's that feeling I get. Some people experience it physically, right? So some people their palms will sweat, or their fists will clench, or their shoulders will go up, or they'll feel heat in their chest, or like something like, I need to say yes, And so when we can, realize, connect, be aware of these triggers or these signals to it that we're sending, we can go, oh, that's one of these moments, just like you said, I'm biting my tongue because I really want to say something. So to the extent you can recognize, oh, I'm getting that feeling, it's being able to, whether it's take a breath, if they've asked you directly, being able to say, hey, do you know what? If really in that moment, you're like, I really want to say yes, I really want to say yes. Just saying, can I get back to you on that? Let me check my schedule. Let me check whatever, let me get back to you on that. Simply that starts to break the pattern of jumping in to say yes so quickly.
And I think, when it comes to saying no in the workplace, I think there's a lot of fear around, being judged if you're a team player, if you're pulling your weight. You also have to consider your reputation. There's so many different aspects that comes into play when something comes up at work and you have to decide, am I going to say no?
Yeah, and I think maybe playing off that, some other things that people fear is that they'll be seen as not being polite. That's something that I hear a lot, right? Like saying no is rude or not polite. And right, again, this is from childhood. If you can't say something nice, don't say it. You want people to like you, right? So I think politeness can definitely be part of this. And if that helps people, just to start with, thank you for asking, Lucy. I appreciate you asking that. As a just that simple can shift it from feeling so like, ooh, I'm saying a bad, unlikable thing. So being direct is the other part of this. So saying something like, thank you for asking, Lucy. No, I can't. Or thank you, Lucy. No, I don't want to do that. That might be harder for some people if they're just learning this or relearning this. But I think a key is to not apologize and give all sorts of reasons. So, oh, I can't do that because, right, I've got to go take the dog, and then I've got to do this, and then I've got to ask this friend as well. I just can't do that. So it makes our no less clear. So for one, for us and for them, it could be if you say, no, I can't do that because I need to take my dog for a walk. Well, they could then be thinking, oh, if I could figure out how to help them take their dog for a walk, I'll get them to say yes. So it's like, it's not that we told an untruth, but we told something that wasn't the whole truth. And we've maybe dug ourselves in a little deeper. Also, again, we've put these excuses out there, these ideas, and it's not really being clear. it's not really saying, I don't want to, I don't have enough time. No, thank you. It's not saying that. And I think we just dig ourselves in deeper over time. We just get more used to keep doing this thing that's not serving us.
I have used recently, somebody wanted me to participate in a group where you had to, be part of a seminar or something and give feedback. And there was absolutely no, and I know it initially they said it was going to take an hour, but damn well it wouldn't, because there'd be follow-up questions, there'd be this and that. And I literally looked at the time and it's like, I just can't. And I think I said something along the lines of, thanks for thinking of me. I'm just slammed right now and I can't fit it in. Mm-hmm. And that's all I said. And I was kind of like, oh, I hope I didn't piss them off. But it was the truth. It was the truth.
Yeah.
But I still felt guilty about it.
Right. Right. So could I ask you a question based on that, Lucy?
Absolutely.
So what did you do instead?
Instead of what?
Instead of being on that, continuing with that thing that was going to take too long?
Probably one of the other hundreds of things I should have said no to.
All right. Well, I was saying,
I can't actually, I can't be specific on, when it was and what I did. I can't really remember when it fell into my schedule, but it was just, I just looked at it and I was just like, there's no way.
Yeah.
There's just like, if I do that, then I'm potentially going to be creating the straw that broke the camel's back. I just can't.
Well, I would call that a success, Lucy.
You're allowed 1 in 100, I think, when it comes to growth. I mean, it's not an overnight thing by any means.
Yeah. Well, you're reminding me. You had a show a little while ago talking about self-love. It was going in the back catalog there.
Yeah.
And just another thing, just because I listened to that. A lot of times, what I'll say is to people to remember that their self-worth doesn't depend on how much they do for other people. Now, I know there's, the love language of doing things for other people. I understand that, but that doesn't change your self-worth. So that seems to be something that, some people journal around, some people just want to remind themselves of that.
That's a juicy one.
Yeah.
That is that really, because I think that's ultimately, it's kind of a perfect storm of what you're saying earlier of, we're dragging that baggage. Although I heard a term the other day that I thought was brilliant. Instead of baggage, emotional baggage, call it a grief case.
Love it.
We're carrying that.
I'm writing it down.
Grief case. I think it was in a dad jokes or something.
Well, that explains it.
We're carrying this baggage with us from when we were kids, because I mean, as a kid, you don't like to be told no.
Right.
So you want to please your parents or your guardians or whatever. So I can see that we're bringing that to us. Plus, in our own lives, our own careers, our own communities, we want to be liked.
Yeah.
Which I have also found is a recipe for disaster. Trying to be liked by everybody, because guess what? Not everybody's going to like you, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And you take all of these other things, these stories that we tell ourselves. And I think that's why, I mean, especially as a Canadian, everyone thinks we're all polite and that. I don't know about that, but we take all of these things and you mash it together, and then you've got this big ball of reasons of why saying no is so hard.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned somewhere up at the beginning of our conversation about like the costs.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, the how people get enough momentum to really start saying no. And it sounds like it was maybe part of yours was there's this sense of like the cost is too great. Finally, right? Like we get, usually we get that when we're all collapsed on the floor, right? We don't get it before that time, but but there's some accounting. I mean, I don't want to make it so cut and dry, but there is an accounting in our lives of either my health, my well-being, my relationships, like something in there is just, you're pinned to the wall, you're on the ground, like something is just failing. And that's when there's this accounting of, okay, if I say yes to this or anything like this, I'm just not sure what's going to happen. I'm more afraid of what's going to happen than if I say no in this moment, and the fear that comes with that. And was I going to say something in there? You said, I've lost it now in the moment, Lucy.
Oh, that's okay. I do it all the time. For me though, my body will actually, if I've pushed myself too far, mentally in just trying to get things done, my brain will hit a wall of exhaustion and basically shut down. I am useless. And I got that brutal reminder this weekend. It was Saturday and we were doing things and I'm just like, it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, I'm done. I'm baked. I can't do this anymore.
So I remember what I was going to say, Lucy, on the other side of it. Could I add something in there?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the other side of it. So I've heard this, and I believe this is true, that most of us are motivated by fears of the negatives more than excitement about the positives, right? That's in general, it's in general how we're oriented, right? But still, I think in here somewhere there is work to be done around essentially like, what's our life's work, right? Take that, whichever way, like, what's our purpose? What's the thing that we do and we love? But it's like those kinds of things. How do we see ourselves adding to the world? And the clear, in my work and the work I do with people, it's like the clearer people seem to get with that and their uniqueness, their strengths, their gifts, whatever you want to call it. And then you put against that, okay, what are the things you're saying yes to that are directly keeping you from doing those things, from being that person out in the world? That seems to help with the accounting, right? It's like a scale of sorts. It's like, oh, well, you say you want to go out and be this public speaker, but you're putting it off to do the other thing for someone else. Like, where do you see yourself 6 months from now? Where do you see yourself 2 years from now if you keep going this way? So it seems like that it's I won't say it's painful, it's uncomfortable to kind of do that accounting and go, yeah, I think I'm not going down the path that I really want to go down here.
But I think it's also because you have to be selfish in saying no. But we've been taught that being selfish is wrong.
Could I say a word about selfish?
Yes.
You're making this easy here, Lucy. No, I'm teasing. So selfish and self-care. So I think those terms get used and reused a lot, like
all the time.
So for me, it's like selfish is, again, that's part of that childhood upbringing, right? Where it's like, oh, you said no, you didn't agree to help and just drop everything. You're being selfish, right? Selfish to me is saying the thing you are doing right now is all about you. It's really only going to benefit you. There's just no other way. It's only about you. And so frequently what I find is people are putting off self-care, right? Exercise, diet, sleep, whatever. And this all falls right into that. And they're doing it because there's a sense of guilt and a sense of, I'm being selfish by taking 30 minutes to go do exercise. I'm being selfish by taking this extra time to cook a meal rather than fast food, whatever it might be. I'm being selfish by going to sleep earlier than doing this thing for someone else or whatever it might be. And my take is sort of a flip on that the self-care part of it is where we recharge our batteries so we can actually serve other people in our lives better. So I think the word selfish, just that was sort of it's a trigger for me, right? Because I'm just like, yeah, for so many years I said, wow, I think I'm being selfish here. I better say yes.
And,
But what
and
go ahead,
that's it.
Lucy. Yeah.
Yeah. So self-care. I mean, I've said numerous times on the podcast, self-care wasn't even in my vocabulary until like the last 5 years. I'm a mother of two kids. Our kids are they're now 19 and 22. And I always worked. My husband's career was very demanding. Mine was, a bit willy-nilly here and there. But I was the one that was the primary caregiver for the kids, simply because my husband made more money. So of course his
Yeah.
career takes priority. That's, there's nothing wrong with that. But it was taking care of the kids, taking care of the house, working full time, making the meals, making sure everyone is taken care of. I always came at the bottom of the list. And you know what happens with a list? You never get those last items done.
Yeah.
And, and that's when I had my big sort of major crisis. I was 44 and my world just blew apart because I hadn't had any focus on self-care. I hadn't even stopped to ask myself what I wanted. There were so many of the things that I hadn't done. Like I said, one way or another, either the body or your universe is going to tell you. And, often it comes as little whispers. You get these little whispers of, maybe you should slow down. Maybe you should have said no to that. Maybe don't do that. Get these whispers. And if you don't listen, the whispers get louder. And if you still don't listen, that's when the universe hits you over the head by a 2x4 and you got no choice but to listen. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
So,
And that's, go ahead, Lucy.
I was just going to say, so for me, everything that I'm doing, like I said before we hit record, I work full time. I spend three days a week doing the podcast, 3 evenings a week doing the podcast. And then I have Nectar Online, the community group.
Yeah.
I've got a lot going on. So I'm now starting to try and teach myself that I have to say no over here because that's not where I'm meant to create value. My purpose is to create value through the podcast and through Nectar, because, those are the tools that people can refer to. And it's like, if somebody comes to me with a problem, it's like, okay, great. You're going to want to listen to episode this, and this. And then we'll chat.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that. If I could offer, I didn't come up with this, but there's a routine I do every morning, almost every morning before I get out of my bed, even when I'm a little groggy. I say, what's something that I want to let go of today? What's something that I want to focus on and really make as a positive highlight? And what's one thing I'm thankful for? And so you can think of that let go of as what's something I want to say no to, right?
Yeah.
So to your point, I could see saying, hey, I want to, the podcast is happening today. So therefore that's my highlight. I'm going to let go of this thing, whatever that yes was, that maybe it's going to have to be a no. And then something about adding the thankfulness piece in there. I'm not quite sure what it does, but it seems to tie these things together. So even if I forget about them, they're not like front of mind during the day. It seems to help me when the moments come, when I'm being tempted, right, to do something else besides what I said I really wanted to do. And I'm not perfect either, right? I might get through my day and go, it didn't quite go as I expected. But the next morning, it's right there back for me again, and I can choose. And I'm just finding for myself, Lucy, like that's helping me in a gentle way, remind myself about what's important, like you mentioned, and just focus on one thing, not this overwhelming mass of things.
And it's not, selfish isn't a bad thing. And I think that's what we have to break. Selfish isn't a bad thing.
I think it's again, it might just be, word choice. I would just say, like, I think very often when people are saying you're being selfish, they're actually talking about self-care. I'm not saying selfish things and people don't exist, but I think a lot of times, if I was going to say you're just being selfish, there's probably some self-care in there too. So it can be tough to tease apart, but selfish, am I selfish because I just took a half an hour to exercise? I would say no, definitively, because I understand part of the reason I'm doing that is I want to be healthy. I want to see my kids grow up. I want to be in their lives as long as possible. I'd like to be on this earth as long as possible, given good health and everything, right? So how is that selfish? You know, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, but I could see in the moment,
Yeah,
if
you
somebody
do.
said, would you help me with this? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to work out for 30 minutes. Someone could say, well, you're just selfish, right? That could happen. But I think I could say, look, this 30 minutes is for me feeling good about myself. So this
Yeah.
is what I'm going to do. I will come back afterwards and help you with that or whatever.
And I find that you have to be brave in having conversations, brave and courageous, because it was a major shift in our house. Our kids don't live with us anymore. They're, like I said, they're young adults. They're in college. So it's just my husband and I. And he was used to, I was always organizing dinner. And then suddenly, at least 3 nights a week, I wasn't. We remedied that by we get the meal delivery kits. So it's all set out. He's got the recipe. He goes at it. It's great. And I said to him one day, I said, I was, recording. I got finished late. I was tired. I was hungry. And there was my dinner waiting for me. And it was such a blessing. And I said to him, I said, thank you so much for taking care of this for me. It just means a lot. And he looked at me and he said, babe, we tag team it. He goes, you're working, building something important for the future. I just made dinner. And it's just, it's sometimes having those conversations that you realize that, okay, I am making up way more shit in my head. I'm writing this story and I'm adding these characters and these side journeys and all of these things. And it's really not. It's just dinner.
I love that story, Lucy. By the way, that's a perfect indication of how different those stories are from what actually would happen, right? And that was even more beautiful of hearing like how your husband sees the work you're doing, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's just, and I think that's an example of the stories we tell ourselves versus how other people see things.
Yeah. Would you, you're reminding me just in that moment, like that sounded, when you were saying about the, all of a sudden it was 3 nights a week when you weren't doing the meals. That sounds like, it was out of necessity, right? It wasn't like you just said, hey, I think I'm going to just not do this. A lot of times I'm encouraging people and asking like, what's one thing you can start saying no to as an experiment? And something about that notion of an experiment, right? Like if you said no to something today and it just totally blew up, you could start saying yes again. You could, but just something you can start saying no to it. And again, you had pointed out, I think you had said family. I can't remember what you said now, but like for some people it's strangers, for some people it's their boss, for some people it's family, friends, significant other. But it's kind of like either a person or a situation, just one thing or one person, and focusing there with a few no's seems to be something really helpful to people to explore those stories that are going on that are probably, it's like the horror movie where they don't show what's happening and you just have to imagine it, right? It's way worse.
Oh God, that's bad.
It's way worse. So
but if anybody is looking to say no to something in an easy way and buy themselves more time, I highly recommend finding some sort of the meal delivery service where you get the little baggie with all your meal. Honest to God, after raising 2 kids and having to figure out what's for dinner 365 days a year for 20 years, I'm done. You're done. The time, like I can remember, it'd be like you'd plan 2 or 3 days at a time and you'd be like making dinner and you'd be like last minute, you go in the grocery store every 2 or 3 days. When you add up the time that it takes to go to the grocery store every 2 days, 2 or 3 days, the cost of groceries to these meal plans, by far you're ahead of the game. And we even stopped it for a couple of weeks, and we realized how much more money we were spending on groceries by not doing it. So it's like just not having to think about what you're going to make for dinner 3 nights a week is such a load off your mind. Sorry, went down a rabbit hole there, but it just seems like such a small thing. But I know the parents out there that are trying to figure out what's for dinner 365 days a year don't.
Yeah. Well, and that's a perfect example of like an experiment. Try it for a week, try it for 2 weeks. There's not a whole lot to lose there. Or even if we say there is, it's like, you could even tell other people, if there's other people involved in the mix, like, hey, I'd like to try this for 2 weeks. Let's see how it goes.
Yep.
Seems reasonable, doesn't it?
It is an easy way just to try something, because, if you're not wasting your mental energy thinking about that, then you do have the time to spend on your goals, your dreams, what you actually want to be creating.
Yeah. I love how you tied that in, Lucy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
John, did you have any final tips for our listeners before we wrap up?
I mentioned like a specific situation. So I would say the one thing, and I know this might sound like easy, but some people have really found it when they know there's a certain situation, a certain person who they would like to say no to a little more, is very simply practicing saying no. So this could be on the really simplest, it could be saying no in the mirror, right? But you practice like, okay, that person's I know they're going to ask me. They're going to ask me for that thing, or to do this or to do that. And just pretending that you hear that and just being able to say, thank you so much for asking, Lucy. I'm going to have to say no to that right now, or I'm not able to do that right now. Something about, and you could do it with a friend or significant other, whoever might be willing to do that. It could be fun too, right? But it's something about just simply getting the word out sometimes makes a difference when the actual moment comes up. And so that's the only other thing I would mention right now. Perfect.
And John, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, my website, www.northstar-coaching.com.
Perfect. If you are looking at connecting with John, make sure you check out the show notes. I'm going to have the links in there. And John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Likewise, Lucy, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creator.